They say you never forget the sound of the first bomb. I wish that were true, but here in Gaza, the bombs never stop. They become part of you, like your heartbeat, persistent, inevitable, and unrelenting. My name is Amal. I'm 26 years old, and I have spent my entire life within these 140 square miles of Gaza, a strip of land that feels smaller every day. I am a nurse, but on most days, I feel more like a gravekeeper, watching over the living as they cling to fragile breaths in a city that has been reduced to ash, blood, and memories. The night my world fell apart began like any other. The hum of drones filled the sky, a sound so constant we hardly noticed it anymore. My younger brother, Sammy, sat cross-legged on the floor, engrossed in his worn-out toy car, the only gift he'd received in years. My father was repairing the shattered window in our tiny apartment, a casualty of the last airstrike. My mother, ever resourceful, stirred a pot of lentil soup on the gas stove, stretching our dwindling supplies into something resembling a meal. Dinner was a sacred ritual for us, a brief moment where we could pretend life was normal. My father always had a story to tell, his voice carrying a warmth that made the walls of our crumbling apartment feel like a fortress. That night, he was recounting a fishing trip from his youth, one he took with my uncle before the sea became a forbidden zone. Same was laughing so hard that tears streamed down his cheeks, his giggles filling the room with a rare, fleeting joy. Then came the silence. It's strange, the things you remember. I don't recall the sound of the explosion, only the absence of sound just before it, the kind of silence that grips your chest and freezes time. In that moment, my father's voice faltered, my mother's hand paused mid-stir, and Sammy's laughter turned into a gasp. Then everything shattered. When I regained consciousness, I was buried beneath rubble. My ears rang so loudly it felt as if the world had been submerged underwater. My mouth was full of dust, my throat raw from coughing. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. My legs were pinned beneath concrete and debris. Somewhere in the distance, muffled cries pierced through the chaos, my mother's voice calling my name. Rescuers pulled me out hours later. I don't know how long I had been trapped. My legs were broken, my face lacerated by shards of glass, and my body felt like it had been crushed by the weight of 1,000 stones. When I asked about my family, no one would answer me. But I knew my father was dead. So was Sammy. My mother survived, but she was never the same. How could she be? Half our family was gone, our home reduced to rubble. That was 14 years ago, yet the memories remain vivid, as if burned into the fabric of my being. Today, I work as a nurse in one of Gaza's remaining hospitals, though calling it a hospital feels generous. It's more like a crumbling shelter with medical supplies, and even those are running out. Antibiotics, anesthesia, bandages, everything is in short supply. The generators that keep the lights on and the ventilators running are old and temperamental. Every day, we pray they won't fail us. Last week, a school in Beit Hanun was bombed. Within an hour, we received over 50 children, some unconscious, others screaming in pain. The halls echoed with cries for mothers, fathers, siblings who would never come. One boy, no older than 10, had lost both legs. His face was pale, his lips trembling as he kept asking for his mother. I held his hand, whispering reassurances I knew were lies. His mother was dead, killed in the same explosion that had maimed him. That night, as I tried to sleep in the hospital basement, we received a call about an airstrike near the Al-Shati refugee camp. The ambulances arrived minutes later, carrying the injured and the dead. Among them was a baby girl, no older than 6 months. Her tiny body was bruised, her face streaked with blood and dust, but she was alive. Her parents weren't so fortunate. We named her Noor, meaning light. She became a symbol of hope in a place where hope feels like a cruel joke. Every nurse took turns caring for her, feeding her, holding her, and whispering prayers into her ears. For a brief moment, Noor reminded us of why we fought so hard to save lives, even when it felt futile. She was a glimpse of the future we desperately wanted to believe in, a future where children could laugh and play without fear of bombs. But hope is fragile in Gaza. 2 days later, a missile struck the hospital. The explosion tore through the upper floors, killing patients and staff alike. The nursery, where Noor had been sleeping, was hit directly. I ran through the chaos, choking on smoke, dodging falling debris and ignoring the searing pain in my injured legs. When I reached the nursery, it was gone. I found her blanket buried in the rubble, but that was all. Noor was gone, just like my father, just like Sammy, just like countless others whose lives were stolen by this endless war. That night, I sat in the ruins of the nursery and cried for the first time in years. I cried for Noor, for the boy who lost his legs, for the children of Beit Hanun, for my father and brother, and for every soul trapped in this living nightmare. The world sees Gaza as a battlefield, but it's more than that. It's a graveyard where the dead outnumber the living. It's a prison where the walls are made of fear and loss. It's a home, fragile and battered, where we cling to what little humanity we have left. This isn't a war. It's a massacre, a slow, relentless genocide. And the numbers, sterile, faceless statistics, don't capture the reality of the lives they represent. They don't tell you about the laughter stolen from a little boy, or the hope extinguished in a baby girl's eyes. They don't tell you about the mothers who bury their children, or the fathers who dig through rubble, praying to find something, anything, of the family they've lost. And they don't tell you about the silence, because in Gaza, the silence is the loudest sound of all. Since the most recent escalations, over 46,000 Palestinians have been killed, including thousands of women and children. These are not militants or combatants. They are families, doctors, teachers, and children who wanted nothing more than to live in peace. At least 30 of Gaza's 36 hospitals have been bombed, leaving the healthcare system on the brink of collapse. Patients die not from their injuries, but from the lack of medicine, electricity, and safe spaces to recover. Schools, mosques, and refugee camps have been hit repeatedly. In one attack, over 500 people seeking shelter in a hospital were killed in a single airstrike. Gaza is under a blockade that has strangled its economy and left its people without access to basic necessities. Food, water, electricity, and medical supplies are in critically short supply. Over 1.6 million people, more than half of Gaza's population, have been displaced. Many live in overcrowded shelters or on the streets, exposed to the elements and further attacks. This story is not just about Gaza, it's about humanity. It's a plea for justice, for empathy, and for action. The people of Gaza are not statistics. They are mothers, fathers, children. They are artists, dreamers, and survivors. They are human. I can't help but wonder how many more will be lost before the world notices. How many children must die? How many mothers must bury their babies before the silence breaks? Each day, as the bombs fall and the hospitals fill, we are reminded of our humanity. Not the soldiers, not the politicians, but the people. The ones who had no part in this war, but have lost everything because of it. It is the children's laughter that will never be heard. the dreams of fathers that will never be realized, the mothers who will never see their children grow up. Their pain is palpable, and it echoes in every corner of Gaza. Gaza is more than just a place of suffering. It's a place of resilience, of strength. These people, despite everything, still hold on to hope. But that hope is running thin. Every day, more lives are taken, and the world remains largely silent. And this silence is not just the absence of noise. It is the absence of empathy, of action, of love. It is a betrayal not just of Gaza, but of humanity. Most Arab countries, despite being neighbors, have turned their backs on Gaza. The cries for help have gone unanswered. The calls for solidarity have fallen on deaf ears. Why? Because it is easier to pretend that the suffering of others doesn't affect us. But one day, karma will come for all of us. We cannot continue to stand by while our brothers and sisters are slaughtered, just as we cannot afford to ignore the lessons of history. We must not be like them. We cannot let Gaza stand alone in its time of need. We are all responsible for what happens to one another. We are all human. So, I ask you, if you have a heart, if you have the will to do something, then act. Do not let Gaza fade into the shadows. Donate to the organizations helping to save lives, to provide food, water, medicine, and shelter for those who have nothing left. The links are provided in the description below. Pray for Gaza. Pray for the children who will never know peace, for the mothers who bury their children, for the fathers who search through the rubble, hoping against hope that their family might still be alive. We are the light in the darkness. Together, we can be the difference. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and please share this message. The people of Gaza need us now more than ever.